Hello, everyone. So I wanted to make a video covering this subject of, I guess you could call it moderate versus left unity, and it's been, very frustrating to me. And centrist versus progressive unity, I think it could also apply. I mean, people like to get hung up in labels. I guess like, oh, do labels matter? I have no idea. Well, I mean, you know, you assess someone's beliefs, right? You go down the checklist of what their policies they're proposing are. And I mean, as Kyle Kalinske on Secular Talk once said, you may not like labels, but it doesn't mean they don't apply to you. So, they're just descriptors. They're just ways to better identify what something is. And obviously, yeah, you know, to say that I'm a progressive, as an example, saying if I were to walk up to someone and say I'm a progressive, that by itself, that doesn't necessarily sum up everything. I get that, but there is a general idea. There's a general kind of area of where that politics lies. It's more to the left of mainstream Democrats. So in other words, yeah, that could be communism, and that could also be social democracy. Yeah. So it's very broad, but it gives you a general sense of where you are on the political spectrum. So it's not the most exact thing, but I think that there is this temptation to kind of be like, don't attack people for certain labels. And probably people will, kind of say that certain people aren't as moderate as they actually are. Like people will say Warren is like a progressive, and I think she does have a lot of progressive tendencies for sure. But I think that she is starting to show more of her moderate tendencies. Um, and the what she prioritizes, what she puts out there. You know what I'm saying? Like what she puts out there and the way that she says it. Like it matters. It matters because she's not going as far as Bernie. Essentially, she's specifically on Medicare for all, which I'll talk to in a little bit. But she's scaling back, so that's a concerted effort to basically curtail the full leftist scope of her vision. So yeah, I mean, like the fact that she's showing more of those moderate tendencies, I think matters. But okay, let's get to a lot of these topics I want to cover. So Obama made comments that he would speak out against Bernie if he were in the lead. Now, supposedly, I think these comments were private and then leaked. Which, yeah, it's like he's obviously not president anymore, but he was in a position of power and he is a public figure. He still kind of represents the Democratic Party, if you will. So I would tend to say, yeah, it's like making your comments in private or not. Like you should speak as if you were in public, because this goes back to like Hillary and her public versus private positions. Like if you're saying one thing behind closed doors and then just lying, just saying something completely different to the public, that is lying. I mean, you're just not being as honest, clearly. So, you know, Obama, yeah, he's saying that essentially if it were to go that far left, he's not saying Warren, so maybe he wouldn't speak out if it was Warren, because basically at this point it's like anyone who isn't Bernie is fine now. They're gonna start making these points, and it gets to be there's a lot of infighting on the left, and a lot of people don't like that. I mean, at the same time, though, we're in a primary. This is exactly what primaries are about. You got to figure out what kind of message you're going to run against the other side with. And I mean, it wouldn't even matter necessarily if it was Trump. If it was Mitt Romney, you would have to figure out on your own side what is the best strategy What is the best message to bring to the American people? And obviously, like, when Romney ran, Obama was president, so they didn't really change their message that much on the Democratic side. But this time, Trump is president. There's a Republican that's president, so we have to have a Democratic candidate that's going to, offer more bold, progressive change, which is what Obama did in 2008 as well. So this should be all very simple to understand, but I just don't. I think the media, they push this narrative that like you have to be moderate, and then just everyone kind of parrots that. I think it's a very different story on the ground when you talk to people on the ground and what they actually want. It's not as if what people talk about on cable news is not indicative of the you know the general American sentiment in the population. I think I've probably made that point many times, but this pisses me off so much what Obama did, and of course it's not just him. He's part of this larger problem, and it's a big problem with Obama because he's such a big name in the Democratic circles. He was the former president, so it's kind of like top of the line now. Like you can't. Who else of more value on our side? So supposedly our side could do this now. I mean, he was the last Democratic president, so it's like basically the whole establishment is against him. But it pisses me off because centrists, they always cry, and they used to do this more, a couple years ago, I guess, or 2 years ago. It's like, oh, we need unity. We need unity on the left. Why aren't we unifying? But if the energy is to the left, if it's with Bernie, then they're going to go completely, 180 and just speak out against that. So they aren't unifying. They want us to unify behind the centrist, moderate ideology on the Democratic side, as it were. And yeah, progressives want a bold left vision, so we want them to unify behind us. So this is, the heart of the fight to me. And it's really kind of about fact denying, because when you look at the polls, when you look at a lot of different facts on the ground, you could talk about the surge in 2008, how we took over the House, and look at how that happened. There was massive upswell in new voters, really, on both sides, but there was just a lot more new voters on the Democratic side that were motivated to vote, probably out of a dislike for Trump, but there was also a lot of strong women candidates like AOC, Ilhan Omar, and those are like the most popular ones, and they're Justice Democrats, all of them. They're very progressive. So that's clearly where the energy is. And the centrists just are all about denying that they don't want to reconcile that fact, that essentially Medicare for all is now the new standard. And it's all, when it comes to healthcare, it's all about trying to kind of retrofit whatever, centrist hack plan you have into that Medicare for all narrative. So it looks like you're just as progressive as Bernie, but you're not, because you're not going to end up fighting for it in that way. And it's amazing to me because Obama, I just want to finish on the Obama thing, like he is so amazing at talking out of both sides of his mouth. It makes absolutely no sense. And it probably just comes down to the timing of when he says these things, because just like a year or two ago, he was praising Medicare for all. He was even saying that universal basic income is not a bad idea. So he loves to pretend to be super left when it's convenient for him and when there's not a lot of pressure to do so. And now that we're up against, the first primaries, they don't want this push to the left. I think another big problem, unfortunately, is Obama might be a little bit narcissistic and think like, oh, well, if I couldn't get bold change done, then no one else could. It's like jealousy. Like he doesn't want Bernie to succeed in that way. So I don't know what to say to that, but it's just I hate that in general on the centrist side of things they cry unity all the time. They say like, oh, we all gotta come together, all that stuff, and then as soon as there's a push to the left, and we see that visibly. I mean, it's so obvious. They're gonna do everything in their power to fight against that. I mean, Bloomberg just entered the race like 20 seconds ago, and he's not even in the first four primaries. The the centrists will do anything to try and stop this, and it's kind of hilarious because they're actually shooting themselves in the foot because they're going to be splitting their own vote by having Bloomberg and Deval Patrick, Tom Steyer. They're they're going to split the vote amongst themselves, and I think they just want to try and get to a brokered convention, and they think that will probably keep Bernie out. But there's a theory that basically once it gets to that point, then Bernie and Warren will have to work together, and I'm skeptical about that too because I don't know that Warren would reciprocate to Bernie. It's like Bernie. I see Bernie like dropping out of the race and then giving his delegates to Warren, but I just don't see Warren doing that to Bernie. She wouldn't even endorse him in 2016. She endorsed Hillary like early on in the primary, so I just the facts on the ground seem to point to a different direction with that. So let's talk about Pete Buttigieg, booty grab. This is another great example of just why this dichotomy, this idea that basically the centrists and the moderates are the reasonable ones and that they're going to get things done. It is based on fantasy, because he's pushing for Medicare for all who want it, which is essentially a public option. You can buy into Medicare and then you can keep your private plan through your job, so on and so forth. You basically keep private insurance, but you can choose that public option, the Medicare for all who want it, which sounds, that sounds great on paper. But as I've gone over in previous videos, I'm sure, like, basically, in a nutshell, what happens is the private sector will push all the sickest people onto the public system, and that will make the risk pools uneven, because the whole idea of private insurance is you're paying them, and if you don't get sick, you're not taking advantage of that service. They're taking your money for profit, and they maximize that profit by not paying for your health care. So they want the healthiest people, because then they don't have to pay for that. So it just makes sense business-wise for the private businesses the private insurance companies to push the sickest people onto the public healthcare system, and then, like I say, like the risk pools will be uneven. The public system will be overwhelmed, and it's like, yeah, you have a disproportionate funding, really, then, because if you're not buying into that Medicare for all system, then you're essentially that has nothing to do with you then. So this is why you need to get everyone involved. You need to have the risk pool even out. And I know it sounds very fear-mongery, I guess, because it sounds like, oh, we're trying to come in and dictate how you do your healthcare. But I think Kyle Kulinski of Secular Talk again makes a great point, because it's like you would never be like, oh, I want if I call the fire department, I only want this fire department to come. Or if I call the police, I only want police from this precinct to come and help me. Like, you don't pick and choose like that in any other way. I want to go drive on a road, but I only want this construction company to have built the road. It doesn't make any sense in any other context. So we're only talking about who's insuring you. The single payer is the government. The healthcare, how it's administered doesn't even change, because every doctor is going to be qualified under Medicare. as it is already the case now. Something like 90% of doctors are qualified or qualified under Medicare. So it's just a nonsense talking point. But it gets down to Pete Buttigieg thinks that that's economically viable. He thinks it's more strategically viable, excuse me, that it'll pass in Congress because, oh, the Republicans they'll be more reasonable with me. So, like, no, because, I mean, like, the only, the thing that is different in this case is that Pete Buttigieg is white. Obama did the exact same thing. He pushed for a public option for like a second. He didn't even push for it that hard. And then they went with the Heritage Foundation plan, which is Obamacare, and they've been stripping it away ever since. The Medicaid expansion was state by state. So if you were in a Republican state with a Republican governor, and they didn't expand Medicaid, then a lot of people died as a result of that. So he's literally doing the exact same thing Obama did, and he thinks that like that is what's going to get passed. But the problem is that it doesn't that doesn't follow. It doesn't have any better a chance at passing than Medicare for all, because to steal from Pete Buttigieg's own line in the debate, if you embrace a moderate ideology, the Republicans will call you crazy socialist. And if you embrace a far left ideology, they'll call you crazy socialist. So it doesn't matter what you do. They're always going to fight against you. You just have to rally the people on your side, win as many, congressional seats as you can, and push the Republicans as best as possible. And you can do that by rallying the people in those areas. I mean, Bernie Sanders said he would go to Kentucky to rally against Mitch McConnell, and I think that has a lot of power in that scenario, because I mean Mitch McConnell's not very well liked. So it comes down to what your strategy is. To think that you're going to just sit down with Republicans that are going to agree with you just because your idea is so reasonable, supposedly, it is not going to work that way. I can guarantee that. So Warren backpedaling on Medicare for all. I believe I may have mentioned this in other videos, but basically she went from saying it's not going to raise taxes on the middle class, going to pay for this in what's called a Medicare head tax, and it's kind of regressive the way it's paid for. But now it's become essentially what Pete Buttigieg is doing. He's or she's doing a public option in her first term, and then she says, I'll fight for Medicare for all in my second term. So, I mean, from a strategic standpoint alone, it's just the dumbest thing I've ever heard, because no one does that. No one ever is just like, I'm going to fight. This thing is so important, okay, that I have to get it passed, but I'm not going to fight for it my first term. I'm going to fight for a half measure the first time, and then the second term, I'm going to come in and fight another big battle. So it's like what? I just don't get how this happens, because I had a conversation with someone who said that Warren was saying what she needed to get elected, which essentially means like she's saying what she needs to be accepted by the establishment, the people that are in charge, and so that she'll become more viable as a candidate. And then once she's in power, she can become more left-wing, kind of like reverse Obama, because Obama ran as a progressive and governed more as a centrist. And so, yes, my response to that is she's not standing up when it's like, this is easy to do now. You're just trying to win an election. So if you're not going to stand up to power now, I think that is a problem. It shows that you don't have the courage of your convictions, in my opinion. I mean, I don't mean to knock Warren that much, because I know that she has a good record of fighting to get the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau created. Um, a lot of great Wall Street accomplishments that she's had. But I think on an overall scale, she she is not in favor of the most transformative change that Bernie is. Um, and she's certainly not in favor of the strategy behind that, which is going state to state to rally against even Democrats that aren't on your side. She said that she wouldn't do that. And that was an older video, I get it, but Bernie said he would do it like very, very recently. So when it comes to Bernie versus Warren, this is when you start to get really granular because the other candidates, I think, are basically done at this point. I mean, Buttigieg has a chance at doing something just because he seems to be the only centrist that has any just shot at anything at this point. I mean, I pretty much predicted that. I thought that he would be the only one to. I thought maybe Kamala would make a run for it, but she's dead in the water. She's in trouble. She's not going anywhere. So, you know, Booty Grab has a lot of popularity to some degree. And it comes down to whether he can win Iowa, is basically what I've heard. So we'll see what happens there. I just think, look, I want to get to Michael Moore on MSNBC because this kind of makes the point I'm thinking I'm trying to make. Hopefully, is that Michael Moore said on MSNBC that he's the new center now. Him and Bernie are the new center, and everyone's always like, "Oh, come to the center. You can't be too far left." Well, I think that's true because when you look at the polls again, when you look at how the American people have moved on the issues over the years, I mean, like they have moved to the left. There's more of an awareness about certain issues like healthcare, ending the wars, even, and raising taxes on the wealthy too. So it's not like you have to like mourn this. To the centrists, it's like the death rattle to think that we're going to go any far left at all, and that it's like, oh, I gotta choose between Bernie and Warren. It's like Warren's going to raise your taxes, but like it's not going to be like that crazy. Like 2% wealth tax on $50 million. Like this should be pretty basic stuff. But I think, okay. I think the media is smarter than this. Most of them are. I mean, there's probably a lot of Kool-Aid drinkers in the media, that's for sure. But they think they know the differences. They just want to muddy the waters. That's what it's all about. So don't believe any of the gaslighting. Don't believe people who are like, oh, well, Bernie or Warren, it's the same difference. It's really not. Because even if you want to just focus on policy, I get that she's much better than any of the other candidates other than Bernie. Yeah, she really is better than most. But on a strategic level, I think that's important. The way that she's going to run her campaign. And look, I think she too often takes the advice of her Democratic strategists, and they give her really bad advice. She walks back comments like this, like with Medicare for All. She even walked back in 2016 about whether the primary was rigged against Bernie. She said it was originally, and then she walked back. So people don't like the calculating. You know what it is? It's like they just want to see that someone is speaking to something and they stick by it. If they're gonna, change their tune or whatever, they got to give kind of a reason for that and a story behind that, so it feels authentic. But she is just someone who I think she does, to a degree, say what she feels she has to get elected, but that's not the strategy to win, in my opinion. It's completely out of touch with what's been going on. I mean, Hillary was beyond accepted by the establishment.